I will now call to order the study session meeting of February 16th, 2022. Members of the public are invited to attend in-person city council meetings in council chambers on the lower level of City Hall. Public access to tonight's meeting is also available on the Local Government Access Channel 8, for Comcast subscribers on the city's YouTube channel online, and by telephone using the call-in numbers posted on the meeting agenda. Joanna, will you call the roll, please?
Mayor Leidy,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wilford,
Here.
Councilmember Whitkovich,
Here.
Councilmember Jaramillo,
Here.
Councilmember Duran Malika,
Here.
Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa,
Here.
Councilmember Goff,
Here.
Councilmember Brown will be absent, Councilmember Walker.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we have our Civic Center work session tonight. So we're going to start with Jay Rankins with MIG. Will lead the discussion, so hello. Jay, before you get started, I think we're just going to do a quick round of introductions. You can kick it off, and then we'll just go that direction.
Sure, great. Jay Rankins with MIG. I'm a principal with the firm, director of our Denver area operations, and director of firm-wide planning and design services, and really excited to be able to work with you all tonight.
Brooks Svoboda, planning director.
Mike Anderson with Continuum Partners, development director at Continuum. Mark Falcone's on the phone right now listening as well.
Eric Enzi, senior planner.
Debbie Tuttle, Economic Development.
Jason Loveland, the finance director.
Okay. Okay. All right. Take it away, Jay.
Okay, great. Well, thank you. What I think we anticipate doing is starting with a presentation, which is really a summary of the memo that was provided to you all, which is a summary of all of our conversations that we had over the last couple of weeks. And then what you didn't see in the memo were some precedent photos, some examples that we pulled either from previous work around the Civic Center, around the master plan, some of the conceptual kind of thinking that had been done previously, or new ideas that came about as part of some of those conversations. And then finally, we do have some exploratory kind of illustrative site plans that really tried to stay true to the program that was being identified for the most part, but looked at different configurations and things that might be considered moving forward. Again, as I think I clarified with all of you when we had the one-on-one discussions, the idea is not to pick one of these alternatives and say, okay, this is what we're doing now, but really as a means of communicating the council's desires to staff and to Continuum, and hopefully finding a sort of a shared path forward. So with that, I'll jump in, I think.
Yep, just hit that. Should go.
There we go. All right. So we have key takeaways. We have some target audience ideas moving forward, and then exploratory illustrative site plans. So the most recent site plan, I think everyone is pretty familiar. I think I shared my screen with this with all of you. So it included 30,000 square feet of commercial, 30,000 square feet for the city hall, 82 townhomes kind of spread across the site, with I believe it's 52 I think in the south, what I'm calling the southwest corner, and then 32 north of City Hall, and then 100 apartments in 2 buildings along Community Center Drive in what I'll be referring to as the northeast corner as we're talking through this. And then as you all saw, we just, again, there's artistic license taken here, but really as far as the footprints and the heights of the buildings, this is that same site plan. We showed some different windows and things like that, just so it was in a similar sort of look and feel as some of the previous renderings, but just a reminder of where we were at during those conversations over the last 2 weeks. And then we have those other additional views looking from the northwest to the southeast, the southwest to the northeast. So, key takeaways, quite a few here. Really robust conversations. Thank you all so much again for taking the time with me. It was great. Appreciate the staff and you all, kind of your willingness for me to get engaged right now. It's kind of fun. And hopefully we can find a great outcome here. So, key takeaways. There was some frustration with Continuum staff that I'll talk about. Strong desire to create a destination and feeling like we're kind of missing the mark there. Desire for more integrated retail and community uses. The highest level of emphasis, I think, across the board was on Memorial Parkway. And how do we activate that space? How do we make it special? How do we make sure that we don't miss the mark? Mixed opinions about the type and location of housing. I don't know if you already know that about each other, but I'll highlight some of those differences. Concerns about the parking. I would say quantity was definitely a consideration. I'll elaborate on this in the subsequent slides, but the amount of the parking for the private uses, maybe being too much, public uses, maybe not being enough, and then also the location and visibility of that parking. Weak connections and low priority given to existing assets. I'll elaborate on that one, pretty jargony. A sense that the financial bottom line is driving the program, and maybe it doesn't need to the same extent as maybe had been thought about previously. And then finally, excitement for some more detail in the next steps. So the frustration with Continuum and the staff. I think generally there's and I'll present and then you all obviously can clarify, add to as you see fit. But around the delays and lack of progress, so the sense that we've gone down a couple different paths, those didn't come to fruition, so time may have been lost. Also a sense that perhaps certain things were almost promised, to the community through those different iterations, and now a lot of those things have disappeared in the most recent site plan concept. That the vision is not being reflected in the current site plan, whether that be from the original master plan or even in the more recent conversations with Continuum, and sort of their initial pitch, and why they were best for the job and the type of place that they wanted to create to serve Northglenn. And then finally, the intent is not really shining through. So this idea going all the way back to really the fiscal sustainability study that I think I told you a few about, that was kind of a precursor to the Civic Center master plan. This idea that if we just, there was an option, I think that an RFP was actually issued to simply kind of move the deck chairs around on these 20 acres, create some new civic buildings, find some places to do that so that, we could keep the other ones operating until we tore them down. And, there's a shift in thinking, a paradigm shift. We want to really create a heart for Northglenn because amazing people, amazing history, and not really a heart, a center for the community that reflects that. Next was around this idea of a strong destination or a strong desire for a destination. So really thinking about family friendly, I think first and foremost, I think that was a common theme amongst all the different council members. This idea that the quality of the development may be lacking. And I think what I heard most frequently from folks was, yeah, it might look okay on day one, but we're thinking about this being a legacy project. We're thinking about this being something that's timeless and continues to give back to the community. And what is it going to look like? What is it going to feel like in 10, 15, 20 years? And then finally, at least 2 or 3 people said, this idea of what's the wow factor? Why would you be proud to show this to someone visiting you from out of town, a family member, maybe visiting from another community nearby? And maybe it should be, maybe not is maybe, but it should be a project that puts us on par with some of our surrounding suburban neighbors and other metro area destinations. This desire for more integrated retail and other community uses. So several council members expressed a fear that the commercial that was being shown without having more information about it felt a bit auto-oriented, a fear that maybe that would feel kind of like a strip shopping center. And probably most importantly, regardless of the design, that it didn't feel integrated into the development, that it felt kind of like it was floating off by itself. And then I think the council is pretty well educated on this, and I'm not sure if it was Continuum in previous presentations or staff or just you're all really smart about this, but that we can't this isn't going to be like the biggest shopping center of all time, right? Like this isn't going to be a downtown with retail on every corner, every street face. But the little bit that we do have, we want to use strategically and make sure that that's adding to this creation of a place and activation. Of that retail, pretty strong desire and a pretty common refrain that it should include some mom and pop shops. How I interpreted that and through all the different conversations was that there should be local ownership ideally. But even if that can't happen, then it should be kind of those small places that you bring your family to. So ice cream shop was mentioned, coffee shop, a wine bar, candy store, things like that, that are complementary to the family-friendly feel that we're trying to create, complementary to the recreation center in the park, and something that's complementary to and not necessarily competing with Webster Lake Promenade. And then the opportunity to supplement the retail with civic and public use. So how are we strategically thinking about the city's programming of these spaces and what the city is contributing, even in the case of, say, the festival lawn, which is going to be really a city kind of project, not necessarily a continuum project to enhance that? How are we sort of strategically locating those to supplement the retail, to create this active space, kind of that Main Street type of feel that was expressed as a desire across the board? The highest emphasis on Memorial Parkway. For the first few folks that I talked to, I apologize because I think I referred to this rectangle a bunch and didn't draw it. As I progressed through the 9 interviews, I've started actually drawing this rectangle. But over and over, kept hearing about this idea that the residential in the what's labeled as A on the diagram in the northeast corner, that's kind of encroaching on not only the Veterans Memorial and maybe being disrespectful in a way to that plaza and the memorial itself, but also that the master plan had this pretty strong sense that there was a civic kind of core there, and that the placement of the buildings was not really respecting that. And then recalibrating the expectations and misunderstandings around the festival lawn, around Memorial Parkway and the festival streets, festival lawn. And so we just had a lot of conversations around that. And I think by recalibrating the expectations, what I heard was, yeah, we like this idea of the festival street, which was the north-south street heading up there. And I actually provided clarification to a few folks, and I can do it again right now, that was never anticipated to be the active retail Main Street. It was meant to be an overflow event space with the hotel, when that was part of the concept, activating a piece of that, perhaps retail on either end on the corners, but really as an event space. And so what I heard through the conversations was, okay, maybe we don't get that, but where is that destination street? Where is that place where we have active uses, where people want to hang out, where it's comfortable, safe to walk? In my estimation, like some people indicated this, some people I'm filling in some gaps, but the Memorial Parkway is the place to create that environment. So next was the highest emphasis then on the Parkway. So I mentioned the apartment encroaching, recalibrating the expectations already. Sorry, I think that was duplicated. So then the type and location of the housing. So the potential location for attainable and workforce housing. This was interesting. I think I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I think it was probably like 7 out of 9 folks thought this was the exact right place to do attainable and workforce housing. There was some concerns as far as on the campus itself or and as part of the development. And then there was a couple people who thought, well, maybe there's actually better places around the community to do that. But in sort of an agree or understanding that the rest of the council probably feels that way, so okay, we'll include it. So then it came to the location on the site of the workforce and attainable housing. And I think across the board, there were concerns about doing that along Community Center Drive. The apartments being there, 1. 2, those being workforce and attainable units. And some people actually cited personal experience with that type of housing and their personal experience, a lot of vehicles a lot of times, per unit, things like that. And then some concerns about the quality of construction. But I think mostly it was about the orientation of the building. And so the parking being right on Community Center Drive, the fact that those would be garages perhaps, or sort of the walk-up spaces, and not really respecting the park or Community Center Drive, and that kind of being the front door of the overall development not being desirable. And then a few people, there were different words or phrases to describe this, but the idea that it's too dense in certain parts, that it feels like a housing development with a little bit of civic use kind of plopped down in the middle of it. And again, I think that a lot of that has to do with orientation. In the memo itself, I included some numbers from the master plan. I think it was around 150 units were contemplated in the master plan, with 150 hotel rooms as well, on top of that. So a lot of people kind of staying overnight, so that idea of activation in the evenings. The site plan that Continuum provided is only 182 units, so more housing units, but when you contemplate that with the hotels, it's actually fewer people kind of residing on a nightly basis. So I think it's more about orientation, about the quality of the place. A couple people mentioned some of the previous iterations of plans that Continuum developed included some smaller kind of open spaces and park-like spaces as part of those, some trail connections, connecting the different areas. So again, I think it's more of a design element than the fact that there is attainable workforce housing or the amount of housing. Concerns about the parking. I mentioned the parking associated with the attainable workforce housing, those apartments along Community Center Drive. But generally, there's a sense that it felt like the overall site plan was being dominated by parking. I think a couple people mentioned that might have been the way that it was being communicated. The site plan, isn't sort of showing, the look and feel, what some of that development might look like, what the urban design or landscaping might look like. But also the sense that even what were streets previously in the master plan looked a lot like parking lots. And so something to be considered, again, the configuration, are there ways to kind of buffer or shield some of that parking so it's less visible? And then the questions about the amount of parking I kind of teed up on that overview slide, but generally it felt like there was a lot of parking for the housing, and it felt like there may still not be enough parking that is easily accessible and nearby to the theater, to the rec center, and to the senior center. Weak connections and low priority given to existing assets. So the photos here represent those that were mentioned. So the recreation center and theater, the E.B. Raines Memorial Park, or Junior Memorial Park, excuse me, the Promenade and the Veterans Memorial seemed as, particularly the park across Community Center Drive, E.B. Raines Park, several people said it seems like whoever did the site plan didn't even know that the park was there. And so how are we relating to the park? How are we leveraging the park, it being a great community amenity, a regional draw in some cases, particularly when there's events. And then wanting the buildings to better relate and for more green spaces and connections between the buildings. I believe that went back to the site plan, at least a couple people identified, that went back to the site plan that included, or the development concept that included the adaptive reuse of the recreation center, and that particular iteration had more green space, and because of the kind of reusing the building, there were some more trails incorporated, and wishing that some of that could be perhaps still captured in a revised concept. Almost done here with the key takeaways. The financial bottom line is driving the program and the site plan too much. So the development should be driven by the community. I think one of my favorite quotes was that the development should be shaped by the market, but driven by the community. Civic Center needs to be a legacy project. And how do we create valuable outcome for the community? It may not be just in dollars and cents. And so several people on council had mentioned, if the return, the equity stake, is a little less, that might be okay if we get a better product at the end of the day. And then I mentioned that key takeaway, the last one around kind of details, additional details moving forward. Sustainability was one that came up. Understanding like, oh yeah, in a site plan, we're not going to see a whole lot of like what's sustainable about the development, but an excitement to kind of get to that place. The idea of incorporating public art was brought up by several council members. Design, placement, design, programming of the city hall was brought up several times, and excitement to get to that stage. And then overall placemaking, how can we, again, with probably the greatest focus on Memorial Parkway, the festival lawn, but also sort of how are we activating those spaces. So that could be things as simple as string lights were brought up, different programming elements, spray ground, splash pad. And again, as I mentioned, some of those elements could actually be city-driven if it's in the festival lawn. Some may be part of the development, but really want to understand what's the feel of the place and not just how many units or how much square feet are going to be built of different things. So I finished all the conversations with kind of two questions. The first of those two was around the target audience. So people naturally sort of broke that into who's going to live here and then who's going to visit here. On the housing, young professionals were identified, particularly with the prevalence of the townhome product. Families were desired, but there was some skepticism of how many families would actually live here, especially as their families kind of grew older and got bigger. Dual income families, the thought was with a lot of market rate for sale townhome product, that a lot of these may actually need to be dual income families. Long-time residents was a strong desire, as well as aging adults and seniors. So still that idea dating all the way back to the master plan around creating opportunities for people to age in Northglenn who may not be able to age in place in their own homes. And then around the community gathering, which would be kind of the who's visiting, families, children, Northglenn residents was the top priority, but also this idea that if we did it right, it still may be a destination, particularly around events, but maybe other times for other regional residents that may want to visit Northglenn and see how great the community is. And then visitors staying at the hotel or hotels nearby. So moving forward, which is a pretty critical part of this conversation, I think the council articulated pretty well that they want to know, they want to see from their partners on staff at Continuum that the Civic Center is a priority. That comes about in different ways. Meeting deadlines, sort of communicating effectively, being open about different decisions that are being made. Council wants confidence that the development is going to create community. So whatever can be done to kind of demonstrate that, show how that's being thought of and it is being integrated into the overall development process. Having new strategies and solutions that respond to the council's ideas and questions. And I appreciated because several people said, yeah, I feel like we're not being listened to. And not that we expect staff or Continuum to do exactly what we're saying, but at least like show how we're thinking about it. And maybe it's a different solution or a different way to get at that. But we'd like to see that demonstrated. And then finally, sensible and defensible development concept that is exciting for council and the community. And I think what a handful of people said is, right now, it would be tough for folks to explain to your constituents why this is a good idea. Why are we doing this development? What is it adding to the community? How is it additive? And so really wanting to work with everybody collectively to move forward in a positive way and know that, have those talking points at the ready because they're so obvious in the design concept and the quality of the development and the place that's being created collectively by everyone working together. So that is the summary of the memo. So we did prepare, as I had promised everybody, just a couple of site plans to, again, not be something that we're like, oh, we're going to build that one. As a communication tool, I'll point out some of the kind of key elements that I think could be considered. It could be a mix and match of these. It could be maybe a couple of these ideas get tweaked and integrated into what has already been developed to take it to that next level. So this and I'll zoom in a second. But first I'll just hit kind of the key points using the those block designations. So this is just so it has a name, so we refer to it Concept A. So this one, actually the northwest block has townhomes and commercial. Oh, thanks. Has commercial. Well, let's just put, yeah, I don't even have to use the blocks then. So it basically moves the commercial to the north side of Memorial Parkway. It flanks this kind of north-south access road here. So you have a piece that is stepped back from, in alignment with where the City Hall was shown on the previous diagram. So it's stepped back from with a large kind of landscaped buffer area from the Veterans Memorial, but still has that access and proximity to a community center drive with parking behind it. You're going to see we've actually in this site concept moved City Hall south of the memorial, taken a little bit of design kind of option here to kind of show how that could relate to the Veterans Memorial too. But it relates to the park, I think is, you know, these two kind of key assets, to the park, to the Veterans Memorial. I'm just gonna move forward here. Then what this does is it actually has a townhome product on the north and west edge, depending on the parking that is provided here. It may or may not, you know, have townhomes on the south edge. The idea would be that this parking here is not necessary for these townhome units. And so this could actually be parking for City Hall and could serve as overflow parking for the Recreation Center, Theater, Senior Center facility as well. There could be a nice walkway through here, you know, different things like that. North of the commercial and a row of townhomes on the north side of the festival lawn would be the multifamily apartments that attainable and workforce housing. So if you can kind of see, with the exception of this commercial, this parking here that would be related to the commercial, all the parking is hidden, quote unquote, from, you know, Community Center Drive, and then it's internalized to these different kind of pieces of the development as well. So as you're walking along the streets, as you're, you know, walking to the commercial space or walking from the Veterans Memorial to the Rec Center, you're not experiencing all those, you know, kind of fields of surface parking. The other key piece here is townhomes along the northern portion here, where the multifamily was being shown. Generally this adds up to about the same number of units of townhomes. This actually has a little bit more than the most recent Continuum site plan. And then the same amount of square footage for the multifamily and the commercial as well, with the 30,000 square feet of commercial, assumed to be 2 stories, and a 30,000 square foot city hall. So again, just to reiterate on this one, some of those key elements, key takeaways that are being exemplified here: respecting and addressing the park, not having parking be the predominant kind of look and feel along Community Center Drive, really trying to create a commercial and civic activated Memorial Plaza that respects the memorial itself and creates opportunities to have kind of a destination on non-event times for families. And then kind of, again, adequately parking the facility, but thinking about where that parking is, so perhaps it could be shared with the Recreation Center and Theater, and also just so it's not so visible. So the second concept, so this is the 3D pop-up of that. So again, townhomes along, this is Community Center Drive down here, the park in the lower left, City Hall here, the memorial. The thought would be that, or the encouragement would be that the townhomes facing the festival lawn, and this option we have more of them, kind of flanking both sides of this block, that those would be live-work units. Several people brought that up from one of the earlier Continuum concepts, that they really liked the live-work idea, even if it's not going to be some sort of commercial use in the short term, at least allowing for that flexibility longer term was something that was highly desired. And I think that is I think that's good there. Though I guess the other thing that we did try to do, and again, these were relatively quick. I think I finished the last conversation on Friday night, sketched these over the weekend, and so we put these together. So, but the other thing that we tried to do was integrate some green space into some of these housing developments. So here, kind of, and this is actually taken from this concept is taken from the most recent continuum plan, but having these kind of walkways with front doors facing them, but looking at the multifamily and seeing it kind of by moving it over here with a less constrained block, the ability to, one, utilize the detention pond, the trail, the access and proximity to the transit center, using the underpass once that is improved, hopefully, and then also integrating some smaller green spaces within the development itself. So then concept B, and I probably should have put these in the opposite order, I apologize. But on concept B, the northwest block is the same as what was included in the most recent site plan that you all received from Continuum. We have a similar configuration with commercial and townhomes on what was labeled as Block A in the northeast corner. The commercial, and I'll advance again here again. The commercial is flanking Memorial Parkway in this case. So similar to what was presented previously, commercial along Community Center Drive, but breaking those two buildings apart, flanking the building, kind of anchoring the Community Center Drive east end of the Parkway, allowing the recreation center some sort of ground floor activation on the city hall, as well as these live work units to activate kind of that middle portion. The multifamily here is actually shifted to the south in some discussions with staff over the last couple of days leading up to today. There's definitely a trade-off there and a feasibility question around the phasing really around that, since you wouldn't be able to build this piece of the multifamily apartments until the new city hall was constructed. So that may have pretty strong implications for funding and phasing. But again, this idea, at least, of looking at kind of keeping the parking internal. The parking is the same here, of course, with the city hall on the north side facing the parking. But then again, townhomes along this north end, which would generally be self-parked, could have a small green space embedded within that as well. Both of these alternative concepts, again, kind of exploratory to kind of look at what are those key pieces, what are the components that are important to council. Maintain that civic rectangle, for lack of a better term. No buildings encroaching on that, a kind of appropriate buffer around the Veterans Memorial. Access really kind of in both configurations the same way, accessing from the north of the development along Memorial Parkway, and then the south side where we currently access the tap side of City Hall. And then I guess the other one was that we did kind of pull this back here to create, kind of respect the civic building here, where we have, the festival lawn kind of doing that for the main door of the rec center. The theater doesn't have too much of that, although the front door is to the south, but some sort of buffer or respect for the civic space. So there it is in 3D. Again, just to kind of orient you, Community Center Drive, the park, townhomes, commercial, flanking both sides, envisioning retail on the ground floor, City Hall with some sort of, activation for facing the festival lawn ideally, live work units facing that with the rec center anchoring the end, multifamily to the south, and then townhomes generally to the north. So that is the presentation. I do think that we anticipated taking a break, but I'd love to just, hear maybe like 5 minutes or something, if that works for you all. If there's reactions, if you felt like I didn't get something right, if you want to elaborate on anything.
I don't think so. I don't think we need a break.
Oh, okay. Let's keep powering through then.
Yeah. It's what we typically do. So that's our our MO. Council, does anybody want to respond to what you just saw or ask questions of Jay? Nick,
Yes,
how
ma'am.
you doing? Yeah.
Doing well, ma'am. I had a little confusion on the second one. Is there a way you could bring that back up? I'm curious as to what's right south of the Veterans Memorial. I didn't catch that.
Immediately south would be commercial. So there's actually sort of a mirror image of the commercial building. So of the 30,000 square feet, you could imagine 15,000 square feet buildings, 75 square foot building plates on 2 stories, south of the memorial and then north of the memorial too. But again, pulled further back from the memorial than the previous multifamily was shown.
Okay, thank you.
So ideally, that's retail, on the ground floor facing the Parkway.
Councilmember Malika?
Yeah, thank you. So I think that there's, first of all, thank you for taking the time to meet with everybody. I think that
Yeah.
probably was really, after a while, you're like, who am I even talking to? What are they saying? I'm sure I was Friday night, guys, so that was my fault. But, I think that you were able to capture, I think, a lot of the feelings that I've heard other council members say as well as myself. So I think at least that's the first step, which I'm really excited about that, that came through in this presentation. When you look at these ideas here, to be honest, there's something I like about each one of them. One of them I like is that the commercial, in this particular one, is that the commercial's forward and on each side. One of the things that I thought would be really exciting to have in this plan would be some of like a Main Street type feel of, a place where people would, walk to and hang out in like in an area. And so, that could provide that a little bit. I don't know which one of you guys said extra green space in between buildings, but I really like that suggestion. And I felt like the option A that you showed, like, kind of elaborated on that a lot, and I like that. So that's just kind of like my feedback so far. I really appreciate hearing everybody's thoughts, because I feel like this is the first time that I'm actually hearing in depth what my other council members have feel too. And so I don't know. I think we're really on the same page with each other. So hopefully we could just kind of find a plan that works for everybody.
Councilmember Goff?
Thank you. Oh, I don't have to unmute myself.
I know. It's going to do that too.
Yes, I think I would agree with a lot of what Councilmember Mullica said. But I did have a question. You got, in the 2 plans, the city hall is in different places. And
Yes.
I'm assuming that in both cases, that could be built before you have to tear down these.
Correct.
Okay. And
Yeah,
so-
that was a consideration. I think the big consideration in terms of the phasing that I pointed out was in this one, because the existing city hall is here, that this half, basically, in essence, half, maybe it is depicted here a little more than half of the multifamily, couldn't be built until the new city hall was opened and this was deconstructed. So that may be a fly in the ointment on this one, but yeah.
Then I would just say also that with the commercial on both sides of the memorial, that could, depending on how that's developed, feel more like a downtown. I guess I was thinking of something like at Bradburn where they have, restaurants and shops and, that kind of a thing rather than like a big restaurant or, something that's not, I think it feels more like a hometown kind of feel, smaller, as you said, mom and pop. So I see that both plans have advantages, and I definitely like, in adding the green. That's probably about all I have at this point.
Okay. Anyone else want to chime in? Oh, Jenny, hello. Welcome. I didn't expect you.
Oh, I know. I've been listening in. It's been really fantastic. I'm gonna hop off now, but just wanted to share a couple of comments. One is that I just really appreciate the work that was done to like really hear council members and to understand where we are and what the sticking points are. Like I feel like those were really well articulated, and I appreciate that. And I'm curious if we're gonna have time to sit with these two designs, because I have to say I'm a bit more excited about these designs than previous designs that I've seen, and I think that we're in a much better place. Like this to me feels like a much better launching place. And so I'm curious if you're able to send out these designs and we're able to sit with them for a little bit of time. Obviously, I know that my colleagues are going to be spending the second half of this conversation kind of giving y'all some feedback, which I think makes total sense, and I trust them 100%. But I'm just curious if we'll be able to see those designs or have them emailed to us.
Yeah. So yeah, we can absolutely share them. This was the risk of doing these also, is you guys are getting pretty excited about them. So I would say we're not, working with Continuum, and so they have every right to do something different. I think the idea is that hopefully, they can pull some pieces from these, pull some inspiration, kind of understand what the council was looking for. But yes, absolutely, we can share these kind of exploratory concepts, as we called them.
Okay.
Okay, and I understand. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And council, good luck. Y'all got this.
And
You're
Jenny,
gonna-
before you jump off, I just wanted to clarify that the memo has a timeline at the very end
Okay.
that has some additional pieces. So I think that's important to share. And I think tonight is where we're going to sit with these and talk through the pieces. So do you want to highlight the pieces that you like from each before you jump off?
Yeah, it was kind of tough to like I wasn't mentally making notes. I mean, I definitely liked the green spaces. I liked how some of the parking was a little bit more hidden. And the other thing I really liked is that one of the biggest frustrations I had, well, I had many with the previous site plan, was the way that we had some townhouses, their backyards backing up to the hotel, and me trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody who would be looking at buying one of those townhouses and thinking, there's no way that I'm going to buy a townhouse and want to raise my kids in a backyard that backs up to a hotel. And so I feel like I really like that there's a bit more green space and a bit more I like the switch with the I think it's multifamily housing, perhaps in the first plan that backs up to the hotel. I think that makes a lot more sense. And the other piece that I really liked was the movement of City Hall towards the front end. And so it was right across from the memorial, the Veterans Memorial. I felt like, it just felt like that just felt a lot more of a natural place for City Hall, as well as in relationship to that particular memorial. There's a lot of things that I saw that I liked. Especially the ground floor retail. Yeah, so I'll stop there, but I trust y'all. It sounds like we're all very much in alignment, and I'm excited to see where this conversation goes when I plug in next.
Awesome. Councilmember Lukman Hiramasa.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. First of all, thank you, Jay, so much. I think you really did such a great job of integrating what everybody had to say. As Councilmember Mulligan said, it's the first time that I hear everybody's opinions and all of these minds together. I feel like a lot of us are on the same page in terms of what we want to see happen, and you capture that beautifully. I almost need to see A and B side by side, where I felt like A seemed a little bit more, honoring that Veterans Memorial Plaza and having City Hall be across. It just felt like that would be a beautiful place to go if you're a resident of North visiting. And then having those open spaces and trails really connect to EV Rains, I think is important too, because if you think of being a destination, a family can spend the whole day riding their bicycles to EV Rains and then cross the street and visit some of those mom and pop shops. And, maybe go into City Hall and see some artwork or whatever it is that we end up doing. So, I mean, that's really all I have to say. I do like the movement of parking spaces being more interior, so it doesn't have that kind of just ugly parking lot space, which is, I think nobody was really happy with that. Both these iterations, I think, capture that. They both look really good in terms of that new layout. But yeah, I think this was really helpful, and I know I came in a little bit later, but there was a lot of, differences in what I saw in August and January.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Excuse me. I think that we made some really great progress, and on hearing everybody else's input, I'm echoing them as well. I do think that also the concept A does have that wow factor and like nice look of the city hall. I think it pays homage to the Veterans Memorial really well. It does, give it like that curved design to it. That's something I really enjoyed. That's just, as an artistic, little touch on it, that was nice. The trees buffering too was nice as well. So I just wanted to see, 'cause I know there was concern from other members of council with, what's the backdrop going to look like for the Veterans Memorial. So that was good on each one. So I think that's great. Obviously, not looking at a parking lot kind of thing was like really good too, because it's more, I think that he did the enclosed look with the parking was real nice too, because if everybody's going to the public amenities around, they're not looking at all of that. It's more the tenants. So that was nice. Yeah, I think pretty much everybody covered it. I just I could go on and talk about, piggyback on what everybody else said, but I do like the progress and everybody's input. It feels like the design is really coming to fruition. I know we're gonna continue to really work it out and see what we can agree upon between these two, or if we can. But I think that within the short amount of time that you had, you did a great job, and thank you.
Councilmember Whitman.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I agree with Jay. Everybody's already said it. I think we're all pretty much on the same page, but I did want to just make sure that my voice was heard. So I totally agree about the internalized parking. Love that idea. All the green space. I love concept A because it's more inviting. I really didn't like all the residential along Community Center Drive. It didn't, in my opinion, feel like anybody would be too excited or even realize that they can go in here and see all this other great stuff. And like Shannon said, I had the same comments about, families spending the entire day like out in this space at the park and then going across the street. So I love that. I love the live work units along the Parkway. And I am kind of excited about this new location for the City Hall. I think that's a much better place for it, surrounding the memorial and then right by the park. So I don't really have anything else new to say. Just thank you so much. Yeah, it seems like you've definitely heard us and we're kind of on the same page, which is great. So thank you.
Councilmember Goff?
Yeah, just one last thing since I've been listening to my colleagues here. I do like this, I guess, with option A, at least it's certainly as far as the location of the City Hall. And I know that was a big, question last time because that's like the first thing that happened. So I do like that location much better in this plan because it gives you that connection to EB Range Park, and as has been said, it is a signal to people driving along Community Center Drive that this is like a civics campus rather than just a bunch of houses.
So thank you. Again, I know you've heard a lot of thanks, but I think this really did feel like purposeful time because you did capture the smaller conversations we had been having. You put them in one place, which is great. And I know that we are not here to choose Plan A or Plan B, right? That's not the work of tonight. So thinking through the elements that you highlighted, I do like City Hall where it is. I had a question for you though, because in our conversation, we talked about, is it possible, should it be possible to have that be a 3rd story as opposed to a 2-story? In this rendition, is it 2 or 3?
We're showing it as a 3-story.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I think that site, actually, it's very interesting, and I think I shared with 1 or 2 of you that when we were developing the master plan originally, that was the original location for the rec center. And it was about the location, it was about it being civic along Community Center Drive, the proximity to the park. But it's also probably the greatest slope on the site is where we are right now, and then kind of heading out to Community Center Drive. And so you can actually do some pretty interesting things there with, similar to what the City Hall does now. We're on that same kind of grade. So you could do 3 stories, it could feel like 2 stories on one portion. But I think it gives you a lot of options there.
Well, and the other reason I like it is it sort of bookends that street as opposed to right next to the rec center. That just felt really just dense and squished. I mean, that's not a technical term, but that's how it felt. So having them spread out with the activity in between, that seems to make more sense to me. And the way the housing is distributed in Plan A, I like better. So I'm not voting for Plan A, but I'm saying I like the way the housing is distributed more, and with the green space. I did wonder what was envisioned for north of the memorial. Is that a single retail space, or is it it had some different shading around it. I didn't know what it was.
Oh, so we were showing maybe the shading would be like plaza space, kind of outdoor, like outdoor seating, that sort of thing. But the idea would be that we were trying to kind of stay true to the program of the previous site plan. So that's probably the larger of the 2 buildings, so probably like 9,000, 10,000 square feet on 2 stories. 18 to 20,000 square feet on 2 stories. So it'd be like 9,000 square foot floor plate. So probably a couple of retail spaces there.
Okay. And I think maintaining, I mean, that rectangle was really important when you drew it in to the plan that we had received, because that is what made it feel weird. So when you spread that back out, I like it a lot better. And I actually, the parking, because one of the biggest concerns I had was, I think we're forgetting, it's one of those assets, it's our theater. It's one of the things that's different. Everyone has a rec center, not everyone has a theater, especially like ours. And so making sure that we have adequate parking for that, and the overflow can actually be done all the way down through to the City Hall parking. So
Yeah.
I just thought that was nice. So.
Yeah. Honestly, that's why we didn't, because I think some people I'm aware that there was an option previously where the City Hall was north of the memorial. And my understanding is with the constraints around the utility easement through there, and then the utility easement to the west, like it's just really difficult to build that building and then have adequate parking associated with it. The other thing that doesn't allow for, which both of these options do, is whether the City Hall is here and this is parking that can be shared with the rec center, or City Hall is here and this is parking that can be shared with the theater and rec center. It just creates that ability, right? Like you can have the overflow parking, you have the shared parking. That's less feasible, I think, with, public parking out here. And then was also responding to the fact that the people did not like the fact that there was just a big parking lot along Community Center Drive.
Yeah.
And wanted there to be buildings and kind of active uses. Front doors is what was talked about a couple times. We want front doors on Community Center Drive, not parking or back doors.
The other thing that I appreciated, and I don't know what you do with it, but through your presentation, the images that you selected to sort of show the feel of the space, I think is really important.
Yep.
And you were
was
just
intentional,
accurate.
yeah.
You got it, right? All of those, I think, we envision, but it's more about the feeling of the space that you sometimes can't get from a 2 or even 3-dimensional model. So I appreciated that, and I know it just kind of speaks to the emotion of the space, which is So what are the next steps for this discussion?
Yeah, so I was thinking that if the folks from Continuum are willing to, if they're willing to sort of share some of their reactions, and I'm happy to facilitate, but my hope is that this has sort of been level setting, got everyone on the same page as far as council is concerned, was a way for council to communicate what they're desiring in the project moving forward to Continuum and to staff. And so if you were okay with that, I think
Yes.
having a dialogue between you and the
Perfect.
Continuum folks would make them the most sense.
Okay.
So,
Yes.
Councilmember Walker's asking me a question, so if you could take a moment and check in
Oh,
with him and see
absolutely.
what his question is.
Sorry if I missed your hand, Councilmember.
No, you didn't. I was just, all of you guys were looking over at that screen and kind of talking about, where the retail would be, where City Hall would be, and you guys were all looking at the screen, but all I could see was everybody's face, so I just kind of wanted to be on the same page. I didn't know if it was going to put that back up.
That's fair.
is she able to point it out with the mouse?
We just
So
need the
we're-
share screen on the video feed.
Oh, gotcha.
Well, we had it for a second. Councilmember Walker, were you able to see any of the presentation?
I was the whole thing until we got into discussion and kind of like where you were bringing up your points on things you liked. I
Okay.
was just
Ah,
while
There
we,
you go.
Here we go.
yeah, that way I
Perfect.
could see everything while you're talking about it.
That's
Thank you.
great. No, thank you for advocating for yourself out in cyberspace. We appreciate it. Okay, go ahead. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for braving the roads.
Yes, no, it was tricky out there, but it's good.
Uh-huh.
CDOT's doing their job. Obviously, we're just, trying to digest this up front, but I would echo a lot of the remarks that, council made. I mean, I think there was some real strength to some of the ideas that, came from this section. I mean, do I need a mic? Thanks, Heather. I'm really intrigued by City Hall there. I do think that anchors that drive really, really nicely. I think that's very powerful. Brooke, you were excited by that too?
Of course.
Okay. I value your opinion a lot, obviously.
I'm just excited, let me put it that way. So.
And, one of the big challenges about the commercial on this plan is the big greenway, right? Because, commercial and retail do best when they're right up to the curb and a sidewalk. And so the greenway, as nice as it is, in the festival lawn, it actually really interrupts the sort of, nice engagement between the parking and the street and the sidewalk and the retail. I'm really intrigued by the retail here. I think one thing I'm intrigued by is sort of maybe exploring it a little bit more here, and really trying to play with that a little bit. I don't know that it looks like it's parking sufficiently, so I don't know whether that's really fully thought through there. And maybe we're just picking up enough street parking over here to kind of cover for it.
Yeah, we were considering the street parking as a part of that solution.
And then I'm also I'd be interested in trying to look at the workforce housing maybe here. I like this building here, and I'm just thinking it would be worth studying bringing it over here, and then having a little more retail here, and then trying to put townhomes actually back here. So those are some of my initial reactions. Those would be things I'd like to explore in the next week.
Okay. Councilmember Mulliker?
One of the things that I was looking at in both of these options, or whatever option comes up, we have the main Memorial Plaza and walkway, but especially when you're looking at, the property to the north, more towards the promenade, there are multiple, I'd really like to see how throughout all of this plan, we're continuing to connect to the park below. So is there walkways specifically that go all the way through? Is there some, are we connecting to the park not only on Memorial Parkway, but throughout the site? I think could also be helpful because, there's people who cross from, all along Community Center Drive and walk around the park. I just really want to make sure that we're, extending out into the park as much as possible throughout the plan. And maybe that's walkways through there, just kind of look like it's easy to get from one side to safely,
Definitely
with flashy
safe.
lights.
Right, lots of light. So can I ask a question about workforce housing? I may have been one of the two that had questions about it. I guess I'd like a really clear definition of what that is. And is it necessary? Is it financially necessary? Is it something that, I know we've heard that we should have it, but how is it different from the property that might be right next door?
What's interesting is that the financial model that we're creating for it, we're working with the state. The state is now wanting to put money into it across the state, because the challenge that we're having is we're just not producing enough housing anymore for people earning between 60% of the average median income and 100% of the average median income, because the rents that income bracket can afford to pay are not high enough to justify new construction financed in conventional ways. And so the hope here is that by creating this kind of a vehicle, a new ownership vehicle, that we can actually build really high quality new product for people in that income bracket, rather than them getting pushed to 40-year-old properties somewhere else. And that those properties, because of that ownership mechanism, won't be as extractive and exploitative in their rent increases over time. So that a family could actually live in one of these buildings and stay there for 10 years, because their rents really only have to increase at something that is inside of CPI, rather than, if it's privately owned, they're just gonna keep raising it to the maximum that's tolerable by the market. So the hope is that we can create in very high value infrastructure places, which this obviously is. Between the rec center, the transit, and in the park and all these other amenities, you would love less transient people to live in these rental buildings that could literally stay there for 10, 15 years. And so the idea is we're trying to create these mechanisms whereby as the Front Range densifies, as all these cities densify, it's a great opportunity to ensure that that good housing that is accessible to people earning between 60 and 100% of average median income could live around these really high value infrastructures on an ongoing basis, that they wouldn't get pushed out because the market just simply, as an example, in the city and county of Denver between 2015 and 2019, 30,000 apartments had rent growth so significant that they were no longer attainable to people earning under 80% of average median income. So 30,000 units just got taken away from that demographic. So the hope here is that we're creating in these high value infrastructures permanently affordable, and I say affordable is probably the wrong word. It's because what we're really trying to do is replace the $200,000 home. 10 years ago, you could buy a new home for $200,000 or $250,000. It's impossible now. And so we may end up finding that more of our middle-income households end up living in rental apartments. So if that's the case, especially with families, this kind of a neighborhood, you could really imagine a family really being able to, having access to the rec center, having access to the park, having access to all the things that are here. So that's the hope.
And that sounds awesome. I 100% agree with that. I think what I do is I fast forward 30 years, and how do we ensure that the property management of that particular apartment building is not going to eventually just let it go? We have some in our city, and it's tragic what the state of it is so many years later. So how do we make sure that doesn't happen?
The way we're structuring it is that the property developer and the asset manager, while they don't own the real estate is owned in a public benefit enterprise. They do get enough of the net operating income that they're going to be motivated to continue to operate the building to a high standard. And the quality of these locations are pretty remarkable. So, I mean, locations like this, we're finding other opportunities in other parts of the Front Range that I would compare. I mean, this is as good a place to build a new apartment building as in the Northeast Quadrant. I mean, when you look at, again, the amenity of the rec center, you look at the transit, you look at the park, this is a great neighborhood for somebody to raise a family in. So I think by picking really high-value locations, that will also help, because it's not commodified. I think a lot of the apartments that we might think of, they tend to be more of a commodity product where there's just they're kind of tucked away, there's lots of them, and it's a pure value, sort of proposition. So and we're trying to design these things. I mean, our intention is to, have a large portfolio of these that we manage throughout Colorado and do it in a manner that meets a really high aspiration for the way people can live and raise families.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Going back to some of your comments and your reaction to it, what was your reaction to kind of the images through the presentation? Like, did that resonate with you, those photos, the kind of the feel of the space, the joy that comes out, the gathering?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are very consistent with what we even had in mind with some of the diagrams that we were showing you, in the previous iterations. Okay. We didn't invest enough energy to attach those very tangible things, but I didn't see anything in these that in any way conflicts with what we would have imagined.
So can we go back, Joanna, to that, we were just using A as an example. There we go. So what do you envision if the green space around the retail separates it? So, because I heard that from you, and if you could explain that more, that'd be great.
Yeah, I might go back up to the. Is this on? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. One of the things that always troubled me about this piece from a retail standpoint is that we only have parking on one side of the street. So we don't have parking on both sides of the street. That head-in parking is incredibly valuable from a retail standpoint, because I like to say everybody's optimistic enough to assume they're going to find one of those parking spaces. So it actually makes it easy for you to make the decision to pull in. In retail, we call it, you need to give somebody a compelling purpose of trip. You have to give them a reason to go to a place. So you either have a deep enough and a broad enough mix of options, so there's this synergistic sort of compelling reason to go, and you further enhance it with, ease of access and ease of use. This is, that's a little bit awkward from what we would conventionally see as being successful retail. This move I found really, really interesting. I think that's really powerful, and I'm really excited to explore this further. I thought this was a really interesting suggestion too. I would like to get a little more critical mass there, and so that's in order to compensate for. If you look at even the way the retail works over here, what really works is you've got a dense enough cluster of stuff so that, if you're not gonna, I forget the name of the sandwich shop that I've gone to a couple of times right there, but there's like 3 different good lunch options, right? So if I've zipped up here and I haven't gotten myself lunch, I go, oh yeah, I'll go over here, and I can't remember the specific name of the sandwich shop, but I know there's 2 or 3 good options there that I can grab lunch. That's a memorable purpose of trip. That means I'm going to go, okay, I can solve my need here. I just want to make sure that we come up with a way to give people a way to give them a really pleasant, interesting experience that still solves their need. So if we underpark it or we make the parking really inconvenient, then we take away some of their incentive and ease of access and motivation. I think there's something really, really interesting here, and I think I would really just like to explore it with a merchandise mix where we say, okay, this space is 3,200 square feet, that would be a nice little sandwich shop. This space is 1,200 square feet, that would be a good coffee shop. This space is, and we actually come up with a merchandise plan. And then we say, are we able to fit enough compatible retailers together so that somebody living 2 miles to the east would say, oh, I've got to go take care of something, I've got to go get lunch, or I've got to go take care of some other need, I'm going to zip over to Northglenn Civic Center and do it there.
Any other comments or questions from council?
Just a clarifying question. So, the townhomes, people are going to be able to own those properties, and the apartments are always going to be rentals, right? Okay.
Correct.
Just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
So as a young professional, what would the price tag be for a townhome in this area?
Well, this is the shocking part, right? It is pretty hard to build a new townhome right now, given what costs are, for something that's less than $400,000 to $450,000. I mean, it's shocking. But I mean, when we built Bradburn, we had in the, mid 2000s, our starting townhomes down there were like $180,000, $190,000.
Okay, and each one of these locations that are residential and also commercial, will they be net zero utilizing solar in any form? Would that be part of the plan?
Yeah, we have increasingly been going to all electric. It's sometimes a little trickier with restaurants, because they still are attached to their gas appliances. We actually have some restaurants that are willing to go all electric, but they tend to be pretty high end. The quick serve restaurants and some of those folks really want their gas still. So I don't know that we could commit to net zero and get the commercial uses that we want yet, but we can certainly do it with the townhomes and the apartments.
Okay, great, and I like your idea of the merchandise plan of making just a good kind of like places to meet, because we have places that we like to meet if we ever have to meet with each other. So it's like, okay, that could be destination for that. So if we're conducting business, great idea there. Thank you.
Councilmember Walker, I saw your hand. Was your question answered?
Well, I kind of wanted, there was some talk after Plan B was presented and some of the reactionary parts about moving the workforce housing down here up to the north or northeast. And I think it's well situated where it's at in both plans. It needs to be back there, so that way it keeps Civic Center Drive looking nice without the huge parking lot. So I want to emphasize strongly that I like where the mixed or where the workforce housing is right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, another question. I'm just going to keep going if you're going to let me.
Go ahead.
So, and I can't see the bottom of this picture. Are there only 2 roads that go into this entire community? There's 3. Is the one on the bottom? Okay,
Yeah.
That's what I thought. I just couldn't see it. How it entered. Yeah, okay. I was like, whew, 2 rows for all of these people sounds horrible. Okay, but 3 sounds, fair. Okay, thanks.
Well, and to that point, is that something where we need more stoplights, or is it going to stay the way it is?
So right now, Memorial is programmed to have a signal put in. So when we get into site planning and entitlements, we'll look at how the traffic distribution works and control of access points and things of that nature.
Is it premature or even appropriate to see what AMD thinks about the City Hall location? Like, you can do it, you
They're like,
can't
oh,
do
no.
it.
You guys need to come up to the mic. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think, when we see both these locations, bottom line is we can give you an amazing city hall in either location. That is true. We're confident about that. And so I think there are pros and cons we see within each. And I have a couple, and then maybe I'll just let David. One of the challenges of this one, I think the pro being further closer to Civic Center Drive, the EB Rains Park, and Community Center Drive. I think that there is power to that there's a civic presence that I think we've all talked about through the programming. So I think having, in this iteration, a northern entry can be a challenge, and especially when you have a lot of people traveling, but I think there's ways we can solve that architecturally as well. I think on the other location, we had talked about a synergy between the rec center and the hill. I think the biggest advantage of this location is the ability to activate that festival lawn. And that doesn't preclude us from doing the same on the Veterans Memorial and bring that same idea. So I think that there will certainly be a different response and a different way that we engage that Memorial Parkway. But I think both are valid and both will have a really strong civic opportunity.
Nothing to add, okay.
Long story short, proceed as you see fit.
Okay. Okay. All right, well, thank you for being here.
Oh,
Yes.
just one, in considering that, as I'm looking at it and just thinking of the sequencing, I'd be curious in that location, from a timing standpoint, with the existing rec center. I know we've kind of looked at it as well, and we've proposed it in that location, but I need to go back and look at some of our notes. But from the timing standpoint, I think the southeast corner might be able to start a little quicker from the perspective of demolition of the existing rec center and whatnot too. So just something else for consideration.
Yep, agreed.
Okay, so to paraphrase, because I want to make sure I heard you correctly.
Yep.
So in plan,
In this one, which is
B.
B, I think, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
B is
The
showing
existing
it
rec
where
center
you-
is just closer to where City Hall is proposed, so the demolition of the existing rec center and whatnot, from a timing standpoint of when this location might be able to start. I think you might be able to start the
plan
option
A sooner. Okay. That's what I thought you said, but I
Yeah.
was getting confused. with plan. Okay. Where do you want to go next? I think I interrupted you.
No, you were great.
This is your-
Well, yeah, that was the kind of dialogue I think we wanted to facilitate.
Yeah.
And you guys being able to ask questions, frankly, of Continuum and vice versa. Do you guys have any questions for council at this point that would be helpful as you are exploring these different things over the next week or two?
No, I mean, I think this was a great exercise. I think candidly, it was great for us to hear directly from you. A lot of what we were working off of was the master plan exercise that had happened several years before, and our presumption was that really captured the broader input. I think enough time passed, and I think it became apparent as these conversations started to advance. So, I mean, it's great for us to have you much more deeply engaged in the specifics of the plan, that now we've heard directly from the things that matter most to you, and this is a better starting place.
So I'll just quickly talk about next steps. So, as it is in that, in your staff memo, is that we plan to engage Continuum. We're actually having a debrief with them tomorrow morning, and then we're reserving next week for staff and Continuum engagement. And then they will move forward with putting together an updated conceptual site plan that we intend to bring back to you on March 30th, so that you guys will have another bite at the apple to see what they've come up with. And also, as we've outlined in the MOU extension that was on Monday, that's also a go, no-go option for council as well, based on what we hear and receive from that. Moving forward, if we are successful at that point, we then have built-in time for additional analysis for engineering and to do the financial pro forma. And then from there, we would come back with a redevelopment agreement. And as that schedule outlines, those subsequent steps that would take place to do that.
Okay. So looking at the tentative timeline, it says June 27th, council approval. Council approval of what specifically?
The redevelopment agreement.
Okay.
So that redevelopment agreement will memorialize the concept plan. It will memorialize the performance measures as to when things will be executed as far as the phasing of the development. It'll include the city's obligations for environmental remediation. It'll also identify the financial obligations for the infrastructure costs, and how those all things will play out. And it will likely also include the memorializing what the structure of the workforce housing program will look like, in as so much as to the concerns that you spoke to regarding what's the means and methods of the vehicle in which they'll operate under.
So do we have, I mean, since they're here, is there a timeline that overlaps with the work that you're doing?
So, I think that the timeline that we have set is certainly flexible. I think there can be, if we are able to identify a site, while all this is going on, I think we can begin to, as quickly as you need. I think we initially anticipated that we would begin concept design with the site sometime in March, and we can be responsive if that's not going to work. But I think that there are advantages, of course, to you and to pushing the design and pushing your construction of your city hall further up, of course. So anyway, long story short is, if there is a city hall site within March, I think that would be consistent with schedules we looked at. We can absolutely be flexible if it pushes beyond that. But
Okay. So, and I do believe that maybe how we got this whole thing started is you came to us and said, where do you want us to put City Hall? And things went everywhere, right? So is that still a question that we can answer before the 30th? And is that a question to council? Like, are we willing to say we can answer that question before March 30th? What are your thoughts on that?
It is a question for council. It is a question for council. If you are prepared to respond to that question, we'd love to hear your feedback. Because to Stefan's point, once we pick a location, we can move to that next step of schematic design. So they're somewhat in a holding pattern, super flexible, being gracious with us. We don't want to lose them as a project team, and they're committing to us that they won't move people around. So that's now on the official record. Right? So, but they can't really do that next step. We've gone through looking at office size, square footages, and common areas, but to get to that next piece of the program, we need to pick a location.
How does council feel about that?
I feel like, honestly, that it's just too early, because until we give Continuum the flexibility and the opportunity to come back with their site plan and their ideas and their thoughts, if we were to pick beforehand, I think it could, I don't know, potentially limit opportunity, whatever creative juices we have coming from your way.
I appreciate that, and I do think, I don't know that it has to go all the way to March 30th, though. We might have pretty quick perspective on this within a couple of weeks. Like I mentioned, can we really get the retail appropriately parked over there? Can we get, what worked about the retail building over there was that we could park it pretty effectively, and it had a good corner. The idea of moving it up to where the MIG team put it, I think is very interesting. It's just hard to know from this diagram whether it will really solve there. So it would be great if we could have a couple of weeks to just kind of play with it.
That's great. Okay. Does anyone have a feeling?
Well, I was just going to say that I like the site where it is, but a couple of weeks sounds fine. So.
I do too. I prefer it closer to EP Rains. I like it right where it is, actually, on that south side. I think there was a rendition when it was on the north side. But, you guys need to figure out that.
I really like it there too. I'm just hoping that we can solve the.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I was gonna say, I agree with Mark, though, that I don't know that it needs to wait till March 30th either, because honestly, a lot keys off of where City Hall goes. And, a lot of the different iterations have always been trying to pay that respect to the sequencing, right, of not having this City Hall be, being deconstructed and not have a home for it to go, so you have to have that interim space. So I think we've studied that location ourselves, and I think there's a lot of the feasibility there. So I think, to Mark's point, just studying that retail. But yeah, I've liked all the comments and like where it is for sure. It gives a good presence, and I did appreciate the bookend part. I think, Mayor, you had mentioned that. It does give that to Memorial Drive there.
So how does staff feel about working with Continuum over the next couple weeks, and then you deciding when you can add it to our agendas? Because I do think we should make that decision as soon as we can, but I appreciate Julie's comments about it's too soon today.
We appreciate that flexibility, and we'll bring it to you as soon as we can, possibly in a separate meeting, though, from regular meetings because they're so full. So as long as I have that flexibility with all of you, and we'll do a doodle poll, that sort of thing, then that should work.
Okay.
Can I just, one last thing as we were talking, it occurs to me, I've been to, if your concern here is with the retail and, accessibility to people, that people would be invited in from Community Center Drive. I know I've seen situations, and maybe, we'll just talk about if it would work or not, and I don't mean to go into the weeds, but there could be some entrance into it that cannot be an exit, so that it doesn't, mess up the traffic on the road.
Yeah,
right in there,
out.
but
Like a
gives,
right in or
like you
something.
can go in that way, but you can't come out that way.
Yeah.
Something
No,
like
that's-
that might help.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, actually.
Oh, yeah. That makes me think, do we need to have like something like that for voting, Joanna? Like, when people vote, they need to be able to drop off and keep going. Where do we put that?
Really good point. Yes, that's very
Really
important.
thinking. Okay. Yeah. Probably a small point, but a good one. Thank you.
Well, it is a good one. Well, because at like 6:50, everyone decides to come and drop off their ballot. So there's like a huge line in front of City Hall. So how are we managing those late voters in our ballot drop?
We'll put it right there.
There you go.
So we have a huge queue line.
There you go. Perfect.
All right. Are there any final thoughts from council or our guests? Anything you want to add, staff? Nope. No.
Thank you for
Okay.
coming out on a snowy night.
Thank you. I hope everyone drive slowly, and be very
We're fine.
careful.
I just had to get my father here from Florida. He landed, he's good, he's here, so.
Probably regretting it.
Yeah.
And your son's getting married? Mark, your son's getting married? Your
My son
son
gets married this weekend, yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.